Aight, aight. What's really going on? Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. Today, I'm taking a look at Cardano against US dollar Tether. We're going to be taking a look at the technical aspects of price action moving forward. We're going to be assessing some key levels, some good buy zones, where I think Cardano is going to go in the near short term. Jumping right into it, we've been kind of steadily gaining since sort of the beginning of this year and end of last year. After breaking upward and holding above the 13-cent support line, we were able to re-interact with what was relative all-time highs around that period of time. Aggressive wicks and aggressive sell-offs near these levels, but we ultimately stayed bullish and broke upward past this ascending trend line, which I've drawn since the beginning middle-ish kind of March of 2020. We've respected and interacted with this trend line kind of since then. It took kind of quite some time, a few months, after falling below it, to interact with it again, but we see interaction with it along these three kind of points here. But we were bullish enough to fly all the way past it, soar all the way up past $1 to $1.48, and now we're in a bit of a euphoric state. Many are talking about Cardano. Many are saying this is going to be big this year. There's plenty of new fundamental support coming in for Cardano recently. Up at these levels, there is very high sell pressure, as you can see with wicks that look like kind of like this. We have 20% pullbacks within the day, 25, 27% pullbacks within the day. From these swing highs, we see almost 30% pullbacks. So there's plenty of high sell pressure up in this range, but there's also just as much buy pressure as well, keeping prices kind of sideways. We seem to be finding support along the $1 level, 99 cents kind of range. I believe this to be a very, very key, significant kind of round level that we need to either hold or fall under before we can determine the next drastic move. I'm going to take a look at EngineeringRobo. We have a new perspective come into play. We have the super buy for, cloud buy, as we came out of this sideways back in September, October, beginning in November of 2020. Cloud buy, super buy for. We came up, found support on 13 cents, super buy. Propelled us upward again to interact with all-time highs, and we've been pumping kind of ever since. We take a look at the fear and FOMO zones for price action against USDT. Ever since entering the FOMO zone around 43 cents, we've been very kind of high up in it here, staying up in it. Weirdly enough, I suspect us to come out of the FOMO zone before attempting more upward movement and momentum. The longer we stay in the FOMO zone, the higher the band will go, and the more breathing room we will get. So the sideways we are, I believe, the healthier. Some downside is welcome, in my opinion. Downside in an uptrend is healthy for the uptrend. But in this FOMO zone, where sell pressure is very high, traders are taking profits. FOMO, fear of missing out. A lot of new traders are coming in, buying at tops, buying at these after these tens of percentages that pump in a day. They buy them and afraid of missing out on Cardano gains. But long-term holders of Cardano are taking profits at this range or selling at this range. That is where this kind of sell pressure is coming in from. We printed a lower high, relatively a very technical minor lower high on this most recent kind of swing upward a week ago-ish. Very technical minor lower high, suggesting some more downward or sideways movement coming into play. Some Fibonacci levels to consider. I'll hide the fear and FOMO zone briefly here. Fibonacci levels I'd like to consider are this 0.786, 1, and 0.618 range. I believe to be very crucial and is where we should hopefully find support above 90 cents. Interaction under $1, in my opinion, I believe to be quite bullish as a great buying opportunity if you haven't yet bought Cardano. This trend line that I've drawn back at the middle of March of 2020, I believe to be still holding significance in this kind of uptrend, even though it took a few months to interact with it again. I suspect another interaction with this trend line, and hopefully along these Fibonacci levels. From this candle and this wick above it here, this candle is not closed yet, so we cannot be certain. But at this exact moment in time, we seem to be interacting with resistance at $1.17. I personally suspect a break downward in the next kind of few hours here. Some sideways, some wicks down to the low 90 cents, perhaps aggressively into the high 80 cent range. But ultimately, I believe Cardano will find support along this ascending trend line here. Perhaps we dip very briefly below it. Worst case, we get rejected off of this level. We fail to hold in 90 cents and we come all the way back down to the 80-cent range. I believe the absolute bottom, in my opinion, was going to be around the psychological 75-cent range. I believe that to be a pretty significant bottom that will allow us to pump back up along this trend line and hopefully find support along it again before continuing the uptrend. Now, still, we are in the FOMO zone, so sell pressure is very, very high. I suspect us to come out of the FOMO zone even if for only a day before we come back up. The FOMO zone does not indicate a top present, like when prices get to it, they do not stop. They can come kind of well into it, but the FOMO zone is suggesting very, very, very high sell pressure, and these are good levels to be taking profits if you've been holding Cardano for a few months now. When we look at Cardano against Bitcoin with EngineeringRobo, super buy 4, cloud buy at the beginning of January to support the upward movement that we had, the gains we had against Bitcoin. Sell 2, sell 3 was present, but the cloud buy 4, super buy held significance. I still believe this sell 2, sell 3 is still something we should keep in mind at this level. This is the range I believe it's affecting. Super buy to pump us back up past this 2,118 Satoshi level that we were rejected off of and took a few days to break. Finally, after swinging up, we've come all the way back down. We've been at we've had a couple weeks of downward price action against Bitcoin. Sell 4 as we fell below that 2118 support line, bottomed out. Would appear to bottom out around 1792 Satoshi. We came back up above 2110 Satoshi with a buy 4 signal in play. Interaction down below it yet again to today. We're back above it, but at this exact moment we are printing what seems to be still a lower high. But with this buy 4 and the fact that we are at support at the moment, I believe this to be a key level that we can hopefully hold in the near future here. Some Fibonacci levels to consider, I believe, are going to be this 786 level, 0.5, and perhaps this 0.382 if we ultimately can't hold the 1801 Satoshi level. I suspect us to come all the way back down to the 1466 Satoshi. Cardano's price action in the near future is going to be heavily reliant on Bitcoin's price. If we take a look at Bitcoin briefly on the Binance chart against US dollar Tether, we have cloud buy 4, tons of interaction with the cloud here when we were sideways back in September of 2020, but the cloud buy and buy 4 ended up closing last. supporting the upward pump as we've been interacting with this trend line that I drew from the beginning of October. We've been interacting and respecting it kind of ever since. We are now falling through it. Sell 4 has printed on this chart, and we are seemingly continuing this kind of downward movement here. I suspect perhaps a little bit of a rejection off of the 55K level that we've kind of pulled down from. Of course, we could very easily be bought up at this moment. Bitcoin is very bullish overall, but after such aggressive pumps like this in such a short amount of time, some sideways and cooling off is very much necessary. My lowest levels for Bitcoin are around the 40K kind of range. 45 to $43,000 is the absolute bottom. I suspect that I suspect, in my personal opinion. Of course, we could very easily break that. What's coming down to 32K for a bit again before we can take off. The farther we get from all-time highs, the more explosiveness can build up, the more potential can occur. With Bitcoin being so bullish as it is, this sideways and these dips will not last that long. They typically don't. And dips are usually bought up very quick, just like kind of this one here as we interact with this kind of the 0.786 sort of line. The low 50,000s was a nice psychological level to be accumulating at, and I believe that is what is occurring today. But with the sell 4 closing so far, I am still short-term bearish on Bitcoin at the moment, and this is going to affect the price of every other crypto, obviously. Now, Cardano, I am bullish long-term, but I do suspect with us being in the FOMO zone and us being quite overbought still, I do suspect some interaction perhaps in the high 80 cents to the 90-cent range before we can see $1.50 again. Thank you for hearing my analysis. Try EngineeringRobo, free, link in the description, and tune in next time.